So that's my whole problem with this COVID situation. We've got to shut everything down. We got to sink the entire ship except for protect the vulnerable and let everyone else go. And that's the thing is, like I said, you can't question this. You can look at the CDC numbers and look and plainly see, plain as day, look 40 and below and be like, whoa. So if you're 40 or younger, no pre-existing conditions, this is almost a nothing burger. And you say that and boom, demonetized, boom, censored, boom, fact checked. I'm looking on the CDC website. So my question, and you can't question this, why are we shutting everything down for everyone? Why? You can't even question that. So that's why I hate talking about COVID. But back to what I was saying with this mutant strain, I think this could be a precursor to 2021. Governor Cuomo is already talking about banning travel to and from the UK because of this mutant virus. And by the way, there's more strains. I think from Reuters, there were 7 different strains of COVID throughout this past year. 7 different major strains. And now we got this one over in the UK. So he's already calling for the banning of travel to and from there. What happens when this comes to the States? What I think is going to happen is, let's say it comes to Minnesota. I think you're going to have certain states, maybe not all of them, but they're going to be calling for the restriction of travel to and from that state. And depending on the governor of that state, they may shut everything down and say, oh yeah, the mutant strain's here. You got to extend these lockdowns. We got to extend them. It's just how it is. That's my prediction. They're going to be using this to extend all of this. And another thing that I want to share here with this whole COVID thing, before we get to the stimulus package, which is an absolute joke, Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, he said his mission is to redistribute wealth in the New York City school system. Saying a lot of people bristle at that phrase, the New York City mayor said, that is, in fact, the phrase we need to use, the redistribution of wealth. And that's another point I want to make with this whole thing is I feel like this is being used as a vehicle, these lockdowns, to push for these radical changes. Now, there's a book called Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. I highly recommend any of you guys read this if you're into politics or you just you want to try to understand some of the tactics being used by organizations like Antifa and BLM and just organizers in general, the ones that fight for this social change and the systemic change that we always hear about. In this book, I'm about halfway through. It's very interesting, but he talks about how people need to fight from within the system. Changing the system, you have to fight from within the system. And in order to make these radical changes, this guy that wrote the book is a communist, by the way. So that's what he wants. He wants equitable distribution of property and resources and stuff like that. That's what his whole goal was, to basically ban private property, all these social platforms. That's what he wanted. So working from within the system, and also you need to, in order to enact this radical change, you need to make people feel very uncomfortable. He talks about how there are 3 groups of people in this world. There are the haves, which is the 1% that Bernie Sanders always talks about, the have-nots, so lower, poorer people, and then the have a little, want mores, and that's the middle class. And that's why I feel like we see this attack on the middle class and this wanting to shrink the middle class, because the less of the middle class there is, the easier it is to enact this social change. And right now we are seeing that shrinkage of the middle class. And let me backtrack here. He also says in order to enact this change, you need to make this have a little, want more group, this middle class, you need to make them feel very, very uncomfortable. Because you can talk about change, but most people are going to just scoff at the idea and be like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but I feel pretty comfortable where I'm at. And this system is working for me, so I want a little bit more. I'm just going to keep doing what I want to do. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep working hard, saving my money, all the good stuff. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to have kids, have a family. They don't want that because that prevents the change. You need to make that group of people feel very, very uncomfortable in order to enact that change. You need to make them beg for this change. And I feel like these lockdowns are doing that. The lockdowns are doing that. They're putting people in financial stress We got over 100,000 restaurants closing, thousands of other small businesses. People are literally going hungry because their businesses are closed down because of this change. So they're begging the government for assistance. The government shut them down. Now they're begging the government for assistance. And they have to. They have no other choice. So when you hear things like the redistribution of wealth, you want to, then you hear things like universal basic income, free college, free healthcare, all of this stuff that has been a radical idea, just 5 years ago. This is becoming more and more accepted. It's becoming more accepted because a lot of people, they're in financial stress right now. They have no choice but to beg for this stuff, to ask for this stuff. And then once we give it to them, once this gets handed over to the government, there's no going back. And that's another point that I want to make is, and I made this in a couple of education videos, we have traded liberty for safety before. We did that after 9/11 when we got the Patriot Act, which was an absolute disaster. And it's still around. Edward Snowden came out and was a whistleblower for that. We'll talk about him in the future episode. And the reaction to him, treating him as a whistleblower versus a traitor to the country. The national security is put at risk, which is totally wrong. If it weren't for Edward Snowden, we probably wouldn't know about the fact that everything in our phones, everything on our computers, every email you send, every phone call you make, a text message, every site you visit, every cell phone tower that you pass that pings from your cell phone gets logged and stored in the government system for them to use if they have to. They don't even need a warrant. You don't even need to know about it. Go to the FISA court, oh, this guy's a security risk. He can't. That happens. That's what happens when we traded liberty for safety in 9/11. We did that. And we haven't got it back yet. And we probably won't ever get it back, unfortunately. So my whole point, COVID is real. It's very real. But we need to be very, 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 very careful in what liberties we give up. Let's just lock down. Let's let the government handle it. Let's get the handouts. We'll just wait for the handouts and universal basic income. They'll take care of us. It's a mistake. It's a huge mistake. Very, very, very big mistake. And which brings me to the COVID-19 relief package. $600 stimulus checks with $300 bonus for federal unemployment benefits in the New Deal. $900 billion New Deal. So that the $600 stimulus checks for every American comes out to, and not every American is going to get it, but it comes out to about just under $200 billion. So there's $700 billion going elsewhere, getting funneled elsewhere. And just like the first one, it's going to a bunch of companies that probably don't need it. There were so many stories about all of these people getting the PPP loans. Didn't even need them. This money it got printed off, funnel it to all these companies, all my friends, all the bankers. And this is, in my opinion, it's going to be a big, big problem in the future. You can only print so much money until, inflation happens. We've been printing, this year alone, we've printed over 23% of every US dollar in the entire existence of this country was printed this year. How that is not going to cause inflation is, I don't think it's going to happen. We're going to have some sort of inflation. It's inevitable. There's too much money out there, too much money being printed. And we have a fiat currency. The fiat currency means that it's not tied to gold. Since 71, it hasn't been tied to gold. So that means the government regulates basically how much our dollar is worth. It's not tied to anything, which is dangerous. It's very dangerous. And I think we're towing a very, very, very bad line with printing all this money. I'm kind of scared to see where it goes. Again, I don't want to be a doom and gloom type person, but like I said, basic economics, basic fiat currency principles, and the history of fiat currencies says that that's inevitable.